11. Who the first inhabitants of Britain were, whether natives or immigrants, is open to question. One must remember we are dealing with barbarians, but their physical characteristics vary, and the variation is suggestive. The reddish hair and large limbs of the Caledonians proclaim a German origin. The swarthy faces of the Silures, the tendency of their hair to curl, and the fact that Spain lies opposite, all lead one to believe that Spaniards crossed in ancient times and occupied that part of the country. The peoples nearest to the Gauls likewise resemble them. It may be that they still show the effect of a common origin, or perhaps it is climatic conditions that have produced this physical type in lands that converge so closely from north and south. On the whole, however, it seems likely that Gauls settled in the island lying so close to their shores. In both countries, you find the same ritual and religious beliefs. There is no great difference in language, and there is the same hardihood in challenging danger, the same cowardice in shirking it when it comes close. But the Britons show more spirit. They have not yet been enervated by protracted peace. History tells us that the Gauls too had their hour of military glory, but since that time a life of ease has made them unwarlike. Their valour perished with their freedom. The same has happened to those Britons who were conquered early. The rest are still what the Gauls once were. 12. Their strength is in their infantry. Some tribes also fight from chariots. The nobleman drives, his dependents fight in his defence. Once they owed obedience to kings. Now they are distracted between the warring factions of rival chiefs. Indeed, nothing has helped us more in fighting against their very powerful nations than their inability to cooperate. It is but seldom that 2 or 3 states unite to repel a common danger. Thus, fighting in separate groups, all are conquered. The climate is wretched, with its frequent rains and mists, but there is no extreme cold. Their day is longer than in our part of the world. The nights are light, and in the extreme north, so short that evening and morning twilight are scarcely distinguishable. If no clouds block the view, the sun's glow, it is said, can be seen all night long. It does not set and rise, but simply passes along the horizon. The reason must be that the flat extremities of the earth cast low shadows and do not raise the darkness to any height. Night therefore fails to reach the sky and its stars. The soil will produce good crops, except olives, vines, and other plants which usually grow in warmer lands. They are slow to ripen, though they shoot up quickly, both facts being due to the same cause, the extreme moistness of the soil and atmosphere. Britain yields gold, silver, and other metals to make it worth conquering. Its seas too produce pearls, but they are of a dark bluish-grey colour. Some think that the natives are unskilful in gathering them, for whereas in the Indian Ocean the oysters are torn alive and breathing from the rocks, in Britain they are collected as the sea throws them up. I find it easier to believe that the pearls are of inferior quality than that the people miss a chance of making a larger profit. 13. The Britons readily submit to military service, payment of tribute, and other obligations imposed by government, provided there is no abuse. That they bitterly resent, for they are broken into obedience, but not as yet to slavery. Julius Caesar, the first Roman to enter Britain with an army, did indeed intimidate the natives by a victory and secure a grip on the coast, but he may fairly be said to have merely drawn attention to the island. It was not his to bequeath. After him came the civil wars, with the leading men of Rome fighting against their country. Even when peace returned, Britain was long neglected. Augustus spoke of this as policy. Tiberius called it an injunction. The Emperor Gaius unquestionably planned an invasion of Britain, but his impulsive ideas shifted like a weathercock, and his grandiose efforts against Germany had come to nothing. It was the late Emperor Claudius who initiated the great undertaking. He sent over legions and auxiliaries and chose Vespasian to share in the enterprise, the first step towards his future greatness. Tribes were subdued and kings captured, and the finger of destiny began to point to Vespasian. 14. The first governor of consular rank to be appointed was Aulus Plautius, and soon after him came Ostorius Scapula, both of them fine soldiers. Not only were the nearest parts of Britain gradually organized into a province, but a colony of veterans also was founded. Certain domains were presented to King Cogidumnus, who maintained his unswerving loyalty right down to our own times. An example of the long-established Roman custom of employing even kings to make others slaves. Didius Gallus, the next governor, merely held what his predecessors had won, establishing a few forts in more advanced positions so that he could claim the credit of having made some annexations. Veranius succeeded Didius, only to die within the year. After him, Suetonius Paulinus enjoyed 2 years of success, conquering fresh tribes and strengthening forts. Emboldened thereby to attack the island of Anglesey, which was feeding the native resistance, he exposed himself to attack in the rear. 15. For the Britons, their fears allayed by the absence of the dreaded legate, began to canvass the woes of slavery, to compare their wrongs and sharpen their sting in the telling. We gain nothing by submission except heavier burdens for willing shoulders. We used to have 1 king at a time. Now 2 are set over us. The governor to wreak his fury on our lifeblood, the procurator on our property. Whether our masters quarrel with each other or agree together, our bondage is equally ruinous. The governor has centurions to execute his will, the procurator slaves, and both of them add insults to violence. Nothing is any longer safe from their greed and lust. In war, it is at least a braver man who takes the spoil. As things stand with us, it is mostly cowards and shirkers that seize our homes, kidnap our children, and conscript our men, as though it were only for our own country that they would. 15. For the Britons, their fears allayed by the absence of the dreaded legate, began to canvass the woes of slavery, to compare their wrongs and sharpen their sting in the telling. We gain nothing by submission except heavier burdens for willing shoulders. We used to have 1 king at a time. Now 2 are set over us. The governor to wreak his fury on our lifeblood, the procurator on our property. Whether our masters quarrel with each other or agree together, our bondage is equally ruinous. The governor has centurions to execute his will, the procurator slaves, and both of them add insults to violence. Nothing is any longer safe from their greed and lust. In war, it is at least a braver man who takes the spoil. As things stand with us, it is mostly cowards and shirkers that seize our homes, kidnap our children, and conscript our men, as though it were only for our own country that we would not face death. What a mere handful our invaders are, if we reckon up our own numbers. Such thoughts prompted the Germans to throw off the yoke, and they have only a river, not the ocean, to shield them. We have country, wives, and parents to fight for. The Romans have nothing but greed and self-indulgence. Back they will go, as their deified Julius went back, if we will but emulate the valor of our fathers. We must not be scared by the loss of 1 or 2 battles. Success may give an army more dash, but the greatest staying power comes from defeat. The gods themselves are at last showing mercy to us Britons in keeping the Roman general away with his army exiled in another island. For ourselves, we have already taken the most difficult step. We have begun to plan. And in an enterprise like this, there is more danger in being caught planning than in taking the plunge. 16. Egged on by such mutual encouragements, the whole island rose under the leadership of Boudica, a lady of royal descent. For Britons make no distinction of sex in their appointment of commanders. They hunted down the Roman troops in their scattered posts, stormed the forts and assaulted the colony itself, which they saw as the citadel of their servitude. And there was no form of savage cruelty that the angry visitors refrained from. In fact, had not Paulinus, on hearing of the revolt, made speed to help, Britain would have been lost. As it was, he restored it to its former state of submission by a single successful action. But many of the rebels did not lay down their arms, conscious of their guilt and of the special reasons they had for dreading what the governor might do. Excellent officer though he was, it was feared that he would abuse their surrender and punish every offence with undue severity, as if it were a personal injury. The government therefore replaced him by Petronius Turpilianus. They hoped that he would be more inclined to listen to pleas in extenuation of guilt or protestations of repentance, since he had not witnessed the enemy's crimes. He dealt with the existing troubles, but risked no further move before handing over his post to Trebellius Maximus. Trebellius was deficient in energy and without military experience, but he kept control of the province by an easy-going kind of administration. The barbarians now learned, like any Romans, to condone seductive vices, while the intervention of the civil wars provided him with a valid excuse for inactivity. There was, however, a serious mutiny, for the troops, accustomed to campaigns, got out of hand when they had nothing to do. Trebellius fled and hid to escape his angry army. His honour and dignity compromised, he now commanded merely on sufferance. By a kind of tacit bargain, the troops had license to do as they pleased. The general had his life. And so the mutiny stopped short of bloodshed. Vettius Paulinus likewise, as the civil wars still continued, declined to disturb the province by enforcing discipline. There was still the same paralysis in face of the foe, the same insubordination in the camp. Only Paulinus was an upright man with no misdeeds to make him hated, and had won affection where he lacked authority. 17. But when Vespasian, in the course of his general triumph, restored stable government to Britain, there came a succession of great generals and splendid armies, and the hopes of our enemies dwindled. Petilius Cerealis at once struck terror into their hearts by attacking the state of the Brigantes, which is said to be the most populous in the whole province. After a series of battles, some of them by no means bloodless, Petilius had overrun, if not actually conquered, the major part of their territory. He would indeed have completely eclipsed the record and reputation of any ordinary successor, but Julius Frontinus was equal to shouldering the heavy burden, and rose as high as a man then could rise. He subdued by force of arms the strong and warlike nation of the Silures after a hard struggle, not only against the valour of his enemy, but against the difficulties of the terrain. 18. Such was the condition to which Britain had been brought by the ups and downs of warfare when Agricola crossed the Channel with the summer already half over. The soldiers thought they had done with campaigning for the present and were relaxing, while the enemy were looking for a chance to profit thereby. Shortly before his arrival, the tribe of the Ordovices had almost wiped out a squadron of cavalry stationed in their territory, and this initial stroke had excited the province. Those who wanted war welcomed the lead given and only waited to test the temper of the new governor. The summer was now far spent. The auxiliary units were scattered all over the province, and the soldiers assumed that there would be no more fighting that year. Everything, in fact, combined to hinder or delay a new campaign, and many were in favour of simply watching the points where danger threatened. In spite of all, Agricola decided to go and meet the peril. He concentrated the legionnaires serving on detachment duties and a small force of auxiliaries. As the Ordovices did not venture to descend into the plain, he led his men up into the hills, marching in front himself so as to impart his own courage to the rest by sharing their danger, and cut to pieces almost the whole fighting force of the tribe. But he realized that he must continue to live up to his reputation, and that the outcome of his first enterprises would determine how much fear his subsequent operations would inspire. So he decided to reduce the island of Anglesey, from the occupation of which Paulinus had been recalled by the revolt of all Britain, as I described in an earlier chapter. As the plan was hastily conceived, there was no fleet at hand, but Agricola's resource and resolution found means of getting troops across. He carefully picked out from his auxiliaries men who had experience of shallow waters and had been trained at home to swim carrying their arms and keeping their horses under control, and made them discard all their equipment. He then launched them on a surprise attack, and the enemy, who had been thinking in terms of a fleet of ships and naval operations, were completely nonplussed. What could embarrass or defeat a foe who attacked like that? So they sued for peace and surrendered the island. And Agricola was extolled as a brilliant governor who immediately on his arrival, a time usually devoted to pageantry and a round of ceremonial visits, had chosen to undertake an arduous and dangerous enterprise. Yet he did not use his success to glorify himself. He would not represent his action as a campaign of conquest, when, as he said, he had merely kept a defeated tribe under control. He did not even use his laurel-wreathed dispatches to announce his achievement. By his very reluctance to admit his title to fame won him even greater fame, for men gauged his splendid hopes for the future by his reticence about an exploit so remarkable. 19. Agricola, however, understood feelings of the province and had learned from the experience of others that arms can effect little if injustice follows in their train. He resolved to root out the causes of rebellion. Beginning with himself and his staff, he enforced discipline in his own establishment first, a task often found as difficult as the government of a province. He made no use of freedmen or slaves for official business. He would not be influenced by his personal preference or by recommendations or petitions in choosing centurions and men for staff duties. The best, he was sure, would best justify his trust. He knew everything that went on, but did not always act upon his knowledge. He would condone minor offences, but dealt severely with major crimes. However, he did not always pronounce sentence. If an offender was truly repentant, more often than not, he was content with that. He preferred to appoint to official positions and duties men whom he could trust not to transgress, rather than have to punish transgressions. He made the contributions of corn and tribute less onerous by distributing the burdens fairly, and put a stop to the tricks of profiteers, which were more bitterly resented than the tax itself. For the provincials were made to wait outside locked granaries in order to go through the farce of buying corn to deliver to the governor, thus being in fact compelled to discharge their obligations by money payments. Or delivery would be ordered to the out-of-the-way destinations at the other end of the country, so that states which had permanent camps close by them were told to send supplies to remote and inaccessible spots. Thus the rendering of a service which should have been easy for all was obstructed in order to line a few men's pockets. 20. By checking these abuses in his very first year of office, Agricola made the Britons appreciate the advantages of peace, which, through the negligence or arbitrariness of previous governors, had been as much feared as war. But when summer came, he concentrated his army and took the field in person. He was present everywhere on the march, praising good discipline and keeping stragglers up to the mark. He himself chose sites for camps and reconnoitred estuaries and forests. And all the time he gave the enemy no rest, but constantly launched plundering raids. Then, when he had done enough to inspire fear, he tried the effect of clemency and showed them the attractions of peace. As a result, many states which till then had maintained their independence gave hostages and abandoned their resentful attitude. A ring of garrisoned forts was placed round them, and so skillfully and thoroughly was the operation carried through that no British tribes ever made their first submission with so little interference from their neighbours.